Is Yemen the next Afghanistan? It's a question that has come up frequently in the wake of last week's attempted cargo bombings. Yemen is a country in the middle of not one but two civil wars, and now the world is asking it to fight a war on terror. Can it do that? And why is al-Qaeda there anyway? Joining me now, one of the New York Times' best reporters, Robert Worth, who has reported extensively on Yemen, and he had a cover story on just this question in the New York Times Magazine. He joins me now from Beirut, where he's based. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, why are we hearing about Yemen? All of a sudden, we'd heard about al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, Pakistan, in Somalia, now Yemen. Why has it moved to Yemen, or why has al-Qaeda sprouted up in Yemen?
Well, al-Qaeda has been in Yemen for a long time. I think the reason we're hearing about it is that it is now aiming attacks at the United States. It's hard to know whether these attacks on the U.S. are just a way to attract publicity, or whether they have in fact decided that that is something that they really care about. As we all know, we've heard a lot about Anwar al-Awlaki, who's an American-born man who's a preacher, a cleric, very charismatic, who appears to be now part of al-Qaeda in Yemen. And there's no question that he has extremely vengeful feelings toward the United States and toward the Yemeni government, and many people believe that he's behind this new emphasis on the United States.
The president of Yemen, effectively a military dictator, President Saleh, is he somebody who is now fully on board this battle against al-Qaeda? In your New York Times Magazine article, you describe a meeting with American officials who present him with evidence that al-Qaeda is attacking him personally. And you write then, that seems to have turned things around, and now the Yemeni government is actually taking the fight to al-Qaeda.
Yeah, by all accounts, that's true, and that President Saleh has taken this much more seriously. There's a lot more American military aid going to Yemen. There are more military advisors there. And they have, in fact, over the past year, not only have they allowed the United States to do airstrikes in Yemen, but the Yemeni military and counterterrorism teams, some of them are very disciplined and good. They've been trained by the United States and other foreign countries. And they have carried out attacks not just in reaction to terrorist strikes, but sort of independently. They've gone after them, particularly in the past few months.
The problem that the government deals with in confronting al-Qaeda is that it has to extend its reach into the country in places it hasn't. It has to perhaps confront tribes that it has never confronted before. It has always had this kind of more consensual arrangement with it. This sounds very familiar. It sounds a lot like Afghanistan. And in fact, you know, the broader question I want to ask you is, it almost seems as though al-Qaeda goes into these kind of no man's lands, these ungovernable spaces with, you know, a lot of local tribal control, perhaps find a few tribes that are accommodating. And so in the United States, always stuck in this position of, in order to battle al-Qaeda, you have to get the central government of this country to extend its reach, its legitimacy, and its control in a way that it hasn't for 2,000 years. Is it possible to do it in Yemen?
It's very difficult. It's hard to say exactly what the right approach is. And the problem is that as the U.S. Gets more militarily involved, again, they're not directly militarily involved, but they've been providing lots more training, and they've been encouraging their Yemeni partners to take a more active military role. That runs a terrible risk in Yemen, just as you say, as in Pakistan and Afghanistan, of alienating the local people who are intensely suspicious of any foreign intervention. And because you inevitably, in areas like that, where intelligence is poor, where the terrain is hard to reach, and the tribes are powerful, you inevitably have some civilian casualties. One of the American airstrikes last year killed quite a number of civilians, and that had a huge effect in terms of protests. And the problem is, of course, that when you already have a secessionist movement in the south and another rebellion in the north, discontent spreads. It's sort of hard to separate one issue from the other. There is not a broad ideological movement in Yemen the way there is in Afghanistan. There's no Taliban. And that, I think, makes it a little bit easier in a sense. On the other hand, you have all the other elements. You have very poor governance. You have a state that is running out of oil, a country that is actually running out of water. Sana'a could be one of the first world capitals to run entirely out of water. All of this makes it incredibly hard to make progress against any kind of insurgency.
As you know, there's talk here about a drone attack on Anwar al-Awlaki, the American-born preacher who sort of inspired the Nigerian underwear bomber and perhaps has been playing a more broad role in inciting anti-American jihad. What do you think would be the effect if there were a drone attack on al-Awlaki?
I think it would be very unpopular in Yemen. I think Anwar al-Awlaki is mostly viewed as a charismatic preacher, and because he isn't known to have actually killed anyone, most Yemenis, I mean, first of all, he's not that well known in Yemen. He's better known in the U.S. because of all the media coverage of him here. He's becoming better known. But I think it would be viewed as an attack on a Yemeni, on someone who, isn't necessarily guilty. Yemenis are deeply, deeply skeptical of this kind of thing. So I think killing al-Awlaki would have a lot of negative reaction. And so there are some people who say that the Yemeni government doesn't want him to be found, doesn't want him to be killed, because they're nervous, understandably, about what would happen then.
So if you were to rate the progress that the Yemeni government, with American assistance, is making in defanging or defeating al-Qaeda in Yemen, al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, what would you say?
It's difficult to say whether they've made any progress. I mean, they have killed a lot of people, but they do not seem to have killed the group's key leaders. We have no reason to think that, I mean, we know Anwar al-Awlaki is out there, and he's a very, very, popular ideologist. We have no reason to think that any of the top leaders are dead. And it only takes a few people to put together, a letter bomb, essentially, that could have terrible, global consequences on the economy. And clearly the number of people, the number of Yemeni soldiers and police that have been killed in the past few months suggests that al-Qaeda, if indeed it's responsible for all those killings, is, if anything, bigger than it was. So I can't say we've made